Good morning. Today I want to talk about a solar eclipse that's coming up in April of 2024 and how it's going to impact America. So let's see if I can share my screen here. And I just need to make a couple of adjustments quickly. Okay, and now I think I'm ready to go. So, Chiron, the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse and America's future. All right. On April 8th, 2024, there will be a total eclipse of the sun in which the sun, moon, and Chiron will all be at 19 degrees 24 minutes of Aries. And this is quite remarkable. Of course, during a solar eclipse, you always have the sun and moon in exact conjunction, but for it to be joined in an exact conjunction by Chiron, that makes this very powerful. So, as they say, that'll leave a mark. Some will be wounded, some will heal, and a few will transcend. And as the next slide shows, the path of totality for this eclipse crosses over a good portion of the United States. You can see it's going to go smack dab through the Texas Hill Country, right through Brackettville, Texas, down here, and through every other states as well. So there'll be several places in the United States where you can get a good view of this total solar eclipse. But now let's talk about Chiron. Chiron, also known in astronomy as 2060 Chiron, is a small celestial body that normally resides between Saturn and Uranus. However, it also occasionally travels inside the orbit of Saturn, which you can see it doing right over here, and outside the orbit of Uranus, which is happening right over here. It was discovered in 1977 by astronomer Charles Kowal, and the glyph for Chiron, a K on top of an O, is said to stand for Object uh, Kowal. And here's the glyph for Chiron right here. Okay. Now, Chiron is named after a centaur in Greek mythology who was renowned as both a teacher and a healer. However, Chiron was eventually wounded by a poisoned arrow and was unable to heal himself. Hence the image within astrology of Chiron as a wounded healer. However, even though we may subconsciously be drawn to myths that embody many of the empirically derived characteristics of the planet, astrology is not mythology and was actually observed in practice as much more important than ancient stories. I feel that there are some astrologers who, if a myth says a certain thing about a planet that is named after a character in that myth, they automatically take it as a given that the planet is going to have that characteristic. But that's not the way in which astrology should advance. Uh, Instead, we need an evidence based astrology which has some statistical verification. And sometimes the actual characteristics of a planet in practice in astrology will match up with the mythology, and other times it doesn't. But we should always be evidence based in our approach to astrology. Okay, now Chiron is often associated in astrology with wounding, but in my experience, it is really a drive within us to transcend the visible world that we see. Plus, it would make no sense for us to have a drive to wound ourselves. Traveling between Saturn and Uranus, Chiron is a bridge between the known and the unknown. And in its purest form, it is a sweet and lightning sensation. But for many, the hard Saturnian shell that they have erected around their reality has to first be cracked before the light can enter. And as I often say, you can't make a cosmic omelet without cracking a few cosmic eggs. Okay, so The planets can be thought of as different drives inside of us. Venus, for example, is the pleasure principle, the drive to reduce tension, exactly as Freud defined it. Mars is a complementary drive to increase our action. And if it wasn't for Mars, we would never get out of bed in the morning. Chiron is a drive to go beyond the world that we see with our eyes and our senses, to transcend things. But in the process, it often has to crack our hard shell first. And some of the things that Chiron is typically associated with, you can see over here: healing, whole making, making things whole, transformation, awareness, spiritual growth, and service to others. Okay, thus, while many individuals will respond to Chiron's call to transcend, many more will first experience wounding as a byproduct of this drive. As Thomas Edison once said, success is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. And when it comes to Chiron in the masses, it's often 90% that are wounded and 10% that are inspired. Okay, now in the July 2nd, 1776 chart for the passage of the Resolution for Independence, that's my preferred chart for America. Chiron is at 20 degrees 6 minutes of Aries in opposition to Saturn. And actually, we'll have that opposition in all the various July 1776 charts, whether you use the July 2nd chart or some of the various July 4th charts. So, anyway, at its best, this reflects America's belief in the spiritual dignity and worth of every individual. That is represented by Chiron and Aries. But at its worst, these higher aspirations are rejected in favor of conservative control of others. And that is represented by Saturn and Libra. That would be a very negative manifestation. Let's take other people, other countries, let's control them. Now, as I've said, on the eclipse of April 8th, 2024, transiting Sun, Moon, and Chiron, they're going to be conjunct natal Chiron in the USA chart, and natal Saturn will be conjunct the lunar nodal axis. You can see south nodes at 15 plus degrees Libra, Saturn in this July 2nd chart's at 14 plus degrees Libra. And the moon, the sun, and Chiron over here, they're all going to be very, very close to natal Chiron in this USA chart. Thus, America will likely experience some wounding and restriction, and will likely have to pay a price for past actions during the months that follow. But some will also experience transcendence. Now, during the eclipse, the Sun, Moon, and Chiron will also be exactly conjunct the Sun-Pluto midpoint in the July 2nd, 1776 chart. And this suggests that a wounding of political leaders might occur. This is extraordinary. The midpoint between Sun and Pluto in this chart is also at 19 degrees Aries, 24 minutes, exactly where Sun, Moon, and Chiron will be in that eclipse. Now, the last time Chiron was at this position of 19 degrees 24 minutes of Aries was in the years from 1973 to 1974. And this period saw the resignations of both President Nixon and Vice President Spiro Agnew. So let's take a little look back at history. Go back to that period from 1972 through 1975. You can see up here we had a series of oppositions of Chiron to natal Saturn, followed by a series of conjunctions of transiting Chiron with natal Chiron. So from 1972 to 1975, transiting Chiron made a series of oppositions to natal Saturn and a series of conjunctions to natal Chiron in all of the July 1776 charts for America. These aspects triggered wounding, healing, and transcendence, and the major story during this period was the Watergate scandal. And the work of the Senate Select Committee to investigate President Nixon and that scandal was one of Congress's finer moments. Also, the environmental movement was getting very active, and Roe v. Wade, both of those things were in the news. Now, if we jump closer to the present, from 2022 through 2025, again, we have this string of oppositions of transing Chiron to natal Saturn, followed by a string of conjunctions of natal transiting Chiron with natal Chiron. And this summer, you can see that even though we don't get an exact conjunction of transiting Chiron with natal Chiron, it gets very, very close. So we're being affected in America by Chiron right now. So we're now experiencing both astrologically and in terms of events over the years from 2022 to 2025, things that are similar to what we saw in the 70s. So far during this period, we've seen the transcendent work of the January 6th committee and ongoing investigations and indictments of Donald Trump. Also, climate change and Roe v. Wade are in the news. So if history doesn't repeat itself exactly when astrology repeats, at least it often rhymes, as people like to say. So this is truly amazing. We got a lot of the same issues. We have great political wounding, both now and back in the early 70s. We got Roe v. Wade now and back in the early 70s. We have environmental things going on now and back in the 70s. Though back in the 70s, we were trying to heal things environmentally. Today, we're being wounded environmentally. And of course, the January 6th committee, it was one of the finer moments of Congress today. It parallels the work of the Senate Select Committee to investigate Watergate back in the early 70s, which was another very fine, very transcendent moment for Congress. Okay, now this is not the first time we have witnessed an eclipse like this. On April 6, 1875, there's another total solar eclipse with the Sun, Moon, and Chiron conjunct in Aries. And this eclipse also stimulated the Chiron-Saturn opposition in all July 1776 charts for America. And you can see that over here. The Moon, the Sun, Chiron, they're all pretty close in Aries during this total solar eclipse. And let's see, it's 17 degrees. Libra, the South Node, is going to be also very close to natal Saturn in our USA chart at 14 plus degrees Libra. Okay, now, was there any wounding in America and the world that year? Yes, there was, as the next few slides will indicate. So I've got a list of things that I found in Wikipedia here. Let me just read through them quickly. These cover things in America and the world, and a couple of things that were outstanding I've underlined. So the Mason County War began as a German-American mob broke into a prison and lynched cattle rustlers in central Texas. The SS Gothenburg sank off Australia's east coast with the loss of approximately 102 lives, including a number of high-profile civil servants and dignitaries. The majority of the Yavapai and Tonto Apache tribes were forced by the United States Cavalry to walk at gunpoint from Arizona's Verde Valley to the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation, 180 miles to the southwest. The two tribes were not allowed to return to the Verde Valley until 1900. And then the Page Act of 1875 was enacted in the United States, effectively prohibiting the immigration of Chinese women. That's certainly a low point for us. And here, Albert's swarm of Rocky Mountain locusts began to devastate the western United States. The size of the swarm has been estimated at 12.5 trillion and it blotted out the sun. That is just unimaginable. Okay, also the German liner SS Schiller wrecked on the rocks off the Isles of Sicily with the loss of 335 lives. And then we had the Dublin whiskey fire in Ireland left 13 people dead and caused millions in damage. The Third Carlist War continued in Spain. That went on from 1872 to 1876. At this one I underlined, Vice President Henry Wilson died of a stroke. That's a wounding for the country here in America. The American merchant sailing ship Ellen Southard was wrecked off Liverpool in England, and 12 crew and lifeboatmen were lost. Okay, the Ottoman state declared partial bankruptcy and placed its finances in the hands of European creditors. It was also suffering widespread nationalist rebellions, resulting in Russian intervention and great power tensions. The German immigrant ship SS Deutschland ran aground off the English coast, resulting in the death of 157 passengers and crew, and an explosion in South Yorkshire. The South Yorkshire coalfield of England resulted in the death of 143 miners. So that's a good deal of wounding in America and in the world at large. However, there were also some events in America in 1875 that promoted healing, some good things. For instance, the United States Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, which prohibited racial discrimination in public accommodations and jury duty. Also, a murder conviction began to break the power of a violent Irish American secret society of coal miners in Pennsylvania known as the Molly Maguires, and an anti slavery society formed in New York. So that's all very, very good. Additionally, there were some important spiritual developments in 1875. These are related to the sweeter side, the more transcendent side of Chiron. So, in particular, the Arya Samaj, a monotheistic reform Hinduism movement, was founded in Mumbai by Swami Dayananda Saraswati. And then the Theosophical Society was founded in New York by Helena Blavatsky, H.S. Olcott, W.Q. Judge, and others. And the Theosophical Society, it's had a big impact throughout the many decades that followed, and many see it as a forerunner to the New Age movement of the 1980s. And of course, the book Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, which outlines the theology of Christian Science, was published in 1875. So these are all new spiritual movements that began in that year. And finally, in 1875, the first performance of the famous Piano Concerto No. 1 by Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky was given in Boston, Massachusetts. And much of Tchaikovsky's music from this point on conveys the transcendent sweetness and beauty of Chiron. And with Chiron conjunct his ascendant, he is the Chiron composer. Okay. We don't have an actual birth record for Tchaikovsky, but this is a time which has been passed down without documentation. And according to this birth time, you can see here Chiron was rising, strongly conjunct his ascendant. So, based upon the sweetness of much of his music, I think of him as the Chiron composer. Okay, on April 20, 2024, not long after the April 6th solar eclipse, transiting Chiron will also be in exact conjunction with natal Chiron in the July 2nd, 1776 chart for America. Also, we'll have transiting Mars in opposition to natal Neptune here and square natal Mars, and that may stir up passions or violence on that day. And this is going to be the first of 3 conjunctions with natal Chiron. The other 2 occur on November 8th, 2023, and February 17th, 2024. Again, we went through similar, uh, let's see, transits from Chiron in the early 1970s, and history is repeating itself. And I've actually got a typo here. This should be November 8th, 2024 and February 17th, 2025. So good. I got that changed right as we're talking. All right. Now the transiting Chiron that occurs on November 8th, 2024 will be accompanied by an opposition of transiting Mercury to natal Uranus right here. A square from the transiting lunar nodes seen here to natal Jupiter, and a conjunction of transiting Jupiter with natal Mars. And these latter aspects could intensify passions on this day, but a sextile from transiting Jupiter to both uh, transiting Chiron and to natal Chiron right here. Those sextiles bode well for a beneficial outcome to things. Okay. I should point out the upcoming sextile of Jupiter and Chiron. It's actually a continuation of the March 11, 2023 conjunction of these planets. And past conjunctions have always brought something new and transcendent into the world that is related to the sign that the conjunction is in. Whenever Jupiter is conjunct Chiron, we get an expansion of some of the sweetness and transcendence of Chiron spilling over into the world in some way that is related to the sign that that conjunction occurs in. Okay, so past conjunctions have brought us television. That one occurred in Taurus, and Taurus has to do with uh, earthly pleasures, things we enjoy, things we like, things that entertain us. Uh, when there was a conjunction Libra, which rules relationships, we got the United Nations. When there was a conjunction Pisces, we got the sophisticated music of the Beatles. The Beatles came together under a Jupiter Chiron conjunction in Pisces. When there was a conjunction in Aries, well, that happened around, I think, 1976 in March, and that was the month that they began filming Star Wars. And Aries represents the individual, and with spirituality, it's a spiritual warrior. And that's what the whole concept of the Force and the Jedi Knights were about. When we got a conjunction of Jupiter and Chiron in Cancer, uh, the month that that happened, that was the month that J.K. Rowling got the idea for the whole Harry Potter series. And though on the surface that series is about magic, underneath it's really about family. That's what Cancer represents. Harry had lost both his parents, and he found a new family with the teachers and friends he made at Hogwarts. Okay, it's also interesting uh, that even though J.K. Rowling got the inspiration for Harry Potter, the idea during a Jupiter Chiron conjunction, it was 7 years before she was able to get that first book published. So sometimes there could be a big lag before the initial influence of Jupiter and Chiron and the actual event in this world. Okay. And then lastly, when Jupiter and Chiron were conjunct in Aquarius, and Neptune also joined in on this conjunction, that's brought about Obamacare. And that was both something humanitarian and something compassionate, representing both the influence of Aquarius and of Neptune. And through collaboration, again, Aquarius, it became a reality. Now, I expected the March 11th conjunction in Aries to put focus on individual spirituality, like the Jedi of Star Wars. I knew that whatever happened, it may not be something that is apparent for a long time. But here's what I discovered. On the very next day, March 12th, what was anticipated to be a very small movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once, it swept the Oscars to become, according to Wikipedia or Internet Movie Database, one of those, the most award-winning movie of all time. And this wonderful film checks all the boxes on transcendent spirituality and spiritual warriors. There's deep spiritual undertones to this movie, and I really encourage everyone to watch it and ponder it. The movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's incredible. Okay, now 3 days prior to November 8th is the 2024 presidential election. And the Pluto-Mars opposition promises some tension and possible violence. But several trines and sextiles, and the important sextile from Jupiter to Chiron may tilt things toward a more enlightened outcome. Okay, so during this election, we not only have transiting Jupiter, making a strong sextile to transcend Chiron, but it's also going to be making a sextile to natal Chiron in the July 1776 charts. Plus Pluto, it's almost back in Aquarius. And so people may be yearning for a more progressive result. It's in Capricorn, but it's 3 months of arc away from being in Aquarius again. It really wants to get back there. Now, some of the same aspects are present on November 8th, are also in effect on November 5th, and the sextile of transiting Jupiter to both transiting Chiron and natal Chiron and all July 1776 charts for America suggests long-term transcendence despite Jupiter's conjunction with aggressive natal Mars, which you can see right here, and also Pluto in Capricorn, but almost in Aquarius, favors a candidate that is strong, in control, rooted in tradition, while also being capable of leading us into a new future of technology and collaboration. That's the Aquarius part we're leaning toward, trying to get back to. Now, the transiting natal Chiron conjunction in the July 2nd, 1776 chart for America occurs a third and final time for this decade on February 17th, 2025. And this time, transiting Saturn opposite natal Neptune right here and square natal Mars over here, that may result in more expressions of discord or violence, but we shall see. Astrology just gives the weather, it doesn't really predict events. It just says there's a heightened probability for this or that. It shapes things, but we also make our own decisions. So, based on the recent past, we can probably expect more problems with climate change and more political discord surrounding Donald Trump or other prominent figures in the months and year to come. However, there will also be opportunities for transcendence for us in the world. And so the question now is, how can we make these beneficial outcomes more likely? One way to accomplish this is through meditation, but when you do so, I recommend spending some of that time focused on the sweet transcendent feeling that, in my opinion, is Chiron's true nature. If you have trouble zeroing in on that, then just focus on feelings of happiness or love. Now, for me, the easy path to these transcendent feelings is my memories of 1970s Austin, Texas. During the 1970s, Austin was this incredible transcendent hippie paradise. It was as close to heaven on earth as you could possibly get. And we can see why if we look back at the astrological chart for Austin. Now, Austin was first incorporated on January 15th, 1839, as the town of Waterloo, but later that year, on December 17th, it was reincorporated as the town of Austin. And notice the opposition of Chiron to the sun and square the moon. Now, even though we don't have an exact time of birth here, I just use noon for the incorporation time, uh, because this surely happened during business hours. The moon's not going to move that far one way or another, so we can be pretty sure that this t-square is going to be there in the chart. Moon is probably going to be in some square relationship to both the sun and Chiron at the time that Austin was incorporated, and this configuration explains the underlying transcendence that's often associated with Austin. This urge to transcend the hard physical reality that pressure is always going to be there. It wants to integrate with the sun, the soul of the city, and with the moon, the people in the city. But look at this. Between 1969 and 1971, there were a whole series of squares from Transcend Chiron and Uranus to the natal sun Chiron opposition that activated the natal sun moon Chiron T square, resulting in a very transcendent decade for many of its residents. So for 2 years, Chiron over here, Uranus over here, both of them squaring sun and moon, Chiron in opposition to, sun and Chiron, transiting Chiron in opposition to natal moon, transiting Uranus conjunct natal moon. For 2 years, they were activating this latent T square. And with Uranus and Libra, relationships were redefined. Men and women dressed alike and were aligned with one another. It was a unisex look. We were all the same in our clothes, our thoughts, our urges. Women used little or no makeup. And this is unlike today, where we have these extremes. On one end of the spectrum, we have what I call testosterone cowboys, these ultra macho men. On the other end, we had Kardashians, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way. I'm just using uh, Kardashians as an extreme for this female sexuality and all this makeup, and making them look very, very different from the testosterone cowboys. That wasn't the way it was in Austin in the 70s. Men and women were dressing in very similar ways, acting very similar, communicating well. We all had the same urges. We all went out to Hippie Hollow on the weekend and just sunned ourselves naked on the rocks. It wasn't lascivious, it just felt very natural. And it was just a wonderful, transcendent time that I haven't seen since. Now, from 2019 through 2021, transcending Chiron and Uranus were once again activating the natal Sun Moon Chiron T square in the chart for Austin, but this time Uranus made sextiles and trines to that natal Sun Chiron opposition. So here I have Uranus at 6 degrees Taurus making a sextile to natal Chiron at 6+ degrees Cancer, a trine to natal Sun at 5+ degrees Capricorn. So, hence, Austin has once again, hopefully, entered a period of transcendence, but this time without the radical redefining of relationships that occurred in the 1970s. Instead, there may be a renaissance in technology and innovation in business. Technology, innovation, creativity, that's part of Uranus. Business, acquiring of possessions and resources, goods we need, that is part of Taurus. Okay. But to return to what you can do individually to make 2024 a good year for America and the world, I recommend the following. Start with meditation and find, however you can, that sweet sensation of transcendence that Chiron represents. If you do, then this will soften your hard shell so that doesn't need to be broken. Also, do what you can to help others through charity and acts of loving kindness. This will make it easier for others to also find that transcendent sweetness of Chiron in life. I think meditation and doing things mentally inside us is very important. We connect with all things at the quantum level through quantum entanglement. Sorry, my voice is starting to go here. But in addition to the spiritual connections we make, we also have to do things on the physical level. We have to feed the hungry, take care of the poor, the orphan, the widow. So always combine your spiritual actions with physical actions. And then thirdly, I recommend that you listen to the music of Tchaikovsky every day, since Tchaikovsky is the Chiron composer. All sensations we have direct and program the mind, and when the beautiful music of Tchaikovsky is in your head, it is much easier for you to feel balanced and to connect with the true and the beautiful. This is something that's very easy to do and that takes no effort, but at the same time is an extremely effective way to bring harmony to yourself and to the multiverse. Good classical music and Tchaikovsky's music in particular at this time can automatically bring harmony into your mind, balance into your mind. It will make your brain function better, and this will ripple out into the world. It will make the whole world a better place. And this is one of the easiest things you can do to make this coming year one of transcendence instead of one of wounding. So, in summary, listen to Tchaikovsky, save the world. In particular, I recommend Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D, played by Jascha Heifetz. It's just so beautiful, so transcendent. And also in the Nutcracker Ballet, there's so many beautiful transcendent melodies in that composition by Tchaikovsky. So listen to Tchaikovsky, save the world. And now let me stop my sharing. Okay, and that's going to be it for this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. I'll stop recording now. So have a good rest of this year and a good 2024, and I hope to see you again soon. So long.